Hello and welcome to Intro to Ethics or Ethics. My name is Tim McKenzie. I'll be your professor. This course is a modular course, which means you have like kind of these modules. Some of them are 14 days, some are 7. I think the first one's 7. There's some are 21. They're different lengths of time. And what happens is each of those sections, each of those modules is kind of a self-contained, has a test, has some other things in it. Has some lessons, and you kind of work your way through it. And at the beginning of each of those, I try to provide a video. And so this is the first one, but this also becomes kind of the video to introduce the first one, but the first one's really about the course. And so the first video is really just about the course. And so I'm going to kind of run through things I think they're important in the syllabus, they're important in the course, things you might want to know, and so that's what I'm going to do. So the first thing I want to talk about is the fact that oftentimes students will come to me and they will say, hey, I was wondering, what do I need to do to be successful in an online class? I've never taken an online class before. And so I always like to provide a little bit of information on what is expected, how to be successful. To begin with, an online class is very different. To begin with, you're largely learning kind of on your own. You have to show up and watch videos, read lessons, you can't just go there. Whereas in a classroom, you're there 9 to 10 every morning, and there's no question, 9 to 10, Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and there's the discussions being had there, the lectures being given there, and all you have to do is show up and it's kind of there. Whereas here, that's not the case. And so the first thing I always say is you need to realize that that's quite a bit different, and that affects it in two ways. First of all, it's easy when you don't have to be there at 9 o'clock every day to go, I was going to work on it this afternoon, but I'll work on it tomorrow afternoon. And the next day, I was going to work on it this afternoon, but I work on it tomorrow afternoon. And with a 21-day lesson or a 21-day module, you may be going, I'll push it off another day. And next thing you know, you've got one day to complete what really is probably a 20-hour lesson. And you end up cutting corners. You spend like 8-10 hours. You hate yourself at the end of it, and you get it done, and you don't do that great, right? So not only did you have a miserable time, but you did horribly as well. Now, my point though is that one of the things I would suggest you set aside the time. This semester, like for example, I've taught online classes as well as classroom classes. And the classroom classes, it's hard to get behind in the grading and the prep work. Because if you have to show up and give a lecture, or you have to show up and return papers on Tuesday, and you don't have any papers to return, students complain. Students notice. They're like, what are we going to talk about? I don't know. Whereas with an online class, you can easily kind of put it outside, out of mind. So what I'm doing is I take my schedule and I'm saying, this is the time I work on my ethics class. I'll either be grading, I'll be responding. I try to respond to emails every day, but I'll be grading. I'll be developing new course stuff. I'll be changing a quiz. I'll be changing a lesson. I'll be going back through stuff and improving it. And that time is devoted to that. I'm not supposed to work on my online logic. I'm not supposed to work on my online world religions. I'm not supposed to work on my online intro to mass communication course. I'm not supposed to work on, advising the student newspaper or anything like that I also do. I'm supposed to be working on ethics. And so that's what I do during that time. And so that would be my first suggestion, is set aside time. Take your schedule right now and say, Mondays, 10 a.m. to noon every Monday, and then every Wednesday, 10 a.m. to noon, and every Friday, 10 a.m. to noon, I work on this class. I read, I do lessons, I write papers, whatever it be, I do at that time. Second of all, the other thing I always tell people is you have to be willing to ask questions. In a classroom, in a classroom, in an in-class classroom, a physical classroom, you are there, and one of your classmates will usually ask questions, and you'll get the answer. And so if you're confused about something, you can kind of rely upon your classmates to ask the question. Whereas in an online class, if I answer a question for Bill, you may still have the question, right? Or if I answer the question for Sue, you may not have a question. And it's only until 2 or 3 people ask the same question I realize there's some confusion, they're saying wrong. Or if you see a date that's wrong or information that's misleading, ask, because that's the way I find out things are wrong. You can't just raise your hand. You can't just talk to me right after class. So send me an email. I don't mind if you send me an email every week with a small question. That's what I get paid to do. I'm happy to do my job. So don't ever hesitate to email me. I don't get annoyed by it. The only time I might get annoyed is if you send me 23 emails a day, or you send me an email every week with just a simple question like, when is this due? Well, you can look at your syllabus for that. But other than that, I mean, I'm more than happy to answer your questions. If you ever just like, should I ask a question on it, just ask it, right? And you're also free to call me, you're free to text me, you're free to do any of that stuff, okay? As far as questions like that, texting and other things, I do say I always try to get back to people within 24 hours. Sometimes it's a little bit longer if it's a question like a specific question about a grade or a specific question about something I have to look up. It says in this section or in the book on page 22 this, then I might have to look it up. That usually takes a little bit longer. The other thing is on weekends, I have my sons, and so not every weekend, but every other weekend. And if I have my kids, I just, usually in the evenings, the only time I really focus on work, and I usually just, glance at, I don't spend more than 10 or 15 minutes sometimes. So don't count on, like, if you send me an email Friday afternoon, like after about 2 o'clock, I may not get back to you till Monday morning. So as far as this course goes, I told you it's modular. The other thing is it's an ethics class, but it's supposed to be half theoretical, half applied. And so the half that's theoretical is getting into your theories, like utilitarianism, virtue ethics, deontological ethics, things like egoism, relativism, just different ethical theories that apply to ethics. The other half is applied. It's sort of saying, is it right or wrong? Is abortion wrong? Is the death penalty moral? Is this immoral? When you use it in this way, is it moral or immoral? What cases, what kind of experimentation, what kind of use of animals is morally acceptable? Things to that nature. With that said, as far as that goes, that there's two different components. Now, the theoretical component is mainly studied via, I give lectures and these soft chalk lessons where you read and you watch little videos and you take exams over that material. So that's one way we do this. The other way is we do the theory. That's kind of the way we do the theory. The applied, on the other hand, is kind of done through these discussion boards. And what I do is I have a discussion board every 2 weeks. Those don't correspond with the modules. Those are every 2 weeks. They are mentioned in the modules, that way you know they're there, but they're not part of the module. They are separate. And so every 2 weeks you do a lesson. And so it might ask you questions like, what is stealing? Does this count as what kind of theft is this? Is kind of the first one. There's one about, an attorney, whether or not he should give information about a client and violate his privilege, that, client privilege, lawyer-client privilege, things of that nature. And so that's the part. And then there are also some papers. So keep in mind that every 2 weeks on Monday, there is always a deadline. But it's also the case that that there's also module deadlines as well. So kind of keep in mind there are different deadlines. There's also some papers in there. Everything is due on Monday, but keep in mind that it's not all contained to the modules. Kind of the theory stuff is in the modules, and then the application is kind of going alongside that. As far as your things, like what I do is I give discussion boards, and the discussion boards are, what you do is you're given a prompt, you're given a case, and you read through the case, you go, okay, how would you handle this? And there's usually a lot of little caveats, right? It's not always just like, I would do this or I would do that, and it's not that simple. I want you to explain why and why you wouldn't. And one of the things I encourage people to do is not just to tell me why they do it, but to say why what they do may have problems. Be willing to recognize the problems in your own arguments, the problems with doing things the way you're doing them. The thing I'm grading these on is not whether or not I agree with your opinion. It's not that you stated your opinion. It's the fact that you stated your opinion in a way that's convincing. And that it's in a way that shows that you've also considered the shortcomings of your position. That it shows thought in the process. That you go, okay, I recognize that, if I say something like that, the death penalty is moral, I also maybe need to account for the fact that there have been people on death row who were later exonerated, later found that they did not commit the crime for which they were on death row. What do you do in that case? I mean, how do you account for that? And so you probably want to take into account how you would justify a system that will actually, at some point, potentially put to death somebody who is innocent, right? Um, you know, I'm not saying that's moral or immoral. I mean, innocent people die every day. So that may not make it an immoral system. It may not. But you need to be willing to consider that. I don't care what your position is. I don't care what your opinion is. I have my beliefs, but my beliefs are mine, and I'm more interested in how you present them and how you defend them. I have friends, and my brother, one of my brother who's very far off on the political spectrum. He and I kind of lean the other way. We argue quite often, and we have a very good time. You know, we enjoy doing that, and we can have a conversation. We can recognize shortcomings, and we can recognize what's strong about the other person's argument, and that doesn't diminish our argument. I think every position, if you believe thing A and person B believes thing B, and they're opposite of each other, it doesn't mean person B doesn't have good reasons for their position. It doesn't mean they don't have credible arguments or credible beliefs. Rather, they probably do. It's just you think that your argument, your reasons, is superior to theirs, that yours overwhelms or pushes it the other way, or that they're somehow missing some information. And so you should be able to have a conversation. You should be able to respect their position, even if you don't agree with it. And that's what I ask. I ask you to be respectful, and that you are critical of your own position, and that you defend your position. And that's what I'm really looking for in that discussion board. That's the first part, which is you give a response. That's about 15 of the 25. It's not about, it is 15 of the 25 points on the discussion board. And that's 15 of the 25 points. I will grade that. I will look at, were you critical? Did you look at the question in depth? Did you consider both sides? Were you critical of your own side? Were you able to give good ideas and good reasons? Were they relevant? Were they not just emotional? Things like that. Then you're supposed to participate in a discussion. And I will grade that. Basically, I want you to respond to at least 2. But if you only respond to 2, I'm probably not going to give you more than half credit on the last 10 points. I might give you 5. I might give you like 2 if they're really bad responses. You need to give thoughtful responses. But what I'm really looking for is to see a conversation. If you do a conversation, somebody responds, and then they respond, and then you respond, and I see there's quite a bit of go back and forth, and you're participating fully, I will give you the 10 points on that. If you're just simply answering the question and then clicking back, a 2-line, hey, I like your idea, that's an interesting thing here, and then hitting return, then I might give you a point or 2 on that last 10. So don't expect this just to be a free points. That's something I will grade, I will read, and I do want to see. And in the past, I've kind of made it like 2 was the minimum, and then once you did that, you got your points. And now I'm kind of applying a more stringent, you need to have an actual conversation. There are going to be 2 papers in the class. Those papers have 2 one's in March, late March, one's in late April. I think April 29th, and no, it wouldn't be April 29th. It's I think it's March 25th and April 29th. Yeah, it was the 29th. Sorry. And they basically are. You look at the back of the book, and the back of the book on the ethical life book. After a certain point, there's a bunch of articles, and what you do is they'll have a topic like death penalty or abortion, and you're going to read all those articles, and then what you're going to do is you're going to summarize one of the arguments, summarize the other argument. You're not giving your opinion, you're going to summarize them, and then give your response. Those are due throughout the semester. That's kind of just to get you to apply and to read, but to be able to read these arguments and be critical of them and to then assess them. As far as it goes in the class, some modules are shorter, some are longer. I would encourage you to work ahead if you have a chance. That's always encouraged because trying to do it all at the last minute can become very difficult. And some modules are longer and you may get through it. And go ahead and move on to the next module because it may only be 14 days and you may feel like it's a little bit more material. As far as the exams go, I do put a time limit on them. The reason I put a time limit on them is I don't want you just to open the exam, look up answers. I want you to actually read the material and engage it. And if you only have 30 minutes to then look back up, you can look back up the answers, but if you only have 30 minutes to do it, you really have to have prepared and know where to look. You have to remember some idea and you may just want to clarify it. But you would never have time to just do the whole thing. So the exam does have a time limit. Finally, this week there is an introductory discussion board. I would encourage you to do that. That is worth 10 points. It's an easy, just introduce yourself, say hi to a few of your classmates. That's easy. And then I also give extra credit if you ever find errors in the class. If you see like a typo, a spelling grammar issue, you think there should be a comma somewhere and there isn't, or something like that, I will give a point when you find those things. Sometimes people can be very diligent and find lots of them. Sometimes I disagree and I may not give you a point if I don't think it's an error. But I'm really looking like dates, things like that. It helps improve the course. It also, when I start getting a lot of these emails, it kind of makes me self-conscious and I feel like I need to fix these things and I'm more diligent in my proofreading. But everybody makes mistakes. That's not to be unexpected. But if you see an error, tell me about the error. I'll give you a point, and that's an extra credit opportunity. I think that's about it. Good luck in the semester. Don't be afraid to call, email, text. I am here to help you. Thanks.